Hey, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to talk about the books that I read in December. How did I close out 2024? Let's dive in. I have to move quickly because I am losing daylight. Okay, so the first book that I read in December ended up being one of my favorite books of the year, which is always nice, I guess, to finish off your year with a favorite. I read Nuclear War by Annie Jacobsen. This is a nonfiction book about what it would be like, potentially, if a nuclear war were to occur. And this book blew me away. There was so much in here that I just didn't know. Mainly the whole point that nuclear war would last about an hour or so. It wouldn't take much time at all for the Earth to be completely obliterated because of nuclear weapons. And then, of course, the fallout of the bombings and things. And this book was intense. I have to admit, I am questioning myself as to why I decided to read this book now. Given our political climate, there's a lot of just uncertainty, anxiety about what's going to happen. Just these sorts of things are things that you don't want to think about, but it's important to know. But it's terrifying because there isn't really much you can do about it at the end of the day. But I guess knowledge is power, although you don't really have any power when it comes to nuclear war. So this book, it's one of my favorites I read, and I gave it 5 stars because it had me thinking a lot. I couldn't stop talking about it. I would talk about it to anybody that would listen, which to me is a sign that this was a really, really good book, really important book. Again, though, if this kind of stuff, if you feel like this would really just jack up your anxiety or your stress, then maybe avoid it. But otherwise, I think it's a really important read. It's a very sobering read. It's a terrifying read, but it's one that I'm really, really glad I read. So yeah, I gave it 5 stars. Then I read a Christmas book because, you know, Christmas time. I read Home for Christmas by Courtney Cole. And this one is about Piper. I don't remember what the main character's name was. Her name is Piper, and she lives in Alaska. And she, at the beginning of the book, is operating her grandparents', it was her grandparents' home back in like pre-World War II. Her grandmother was like a teenager during World War II. And so the house has been in their family for generations, and currently it is a lodge. So people come there to hunt and ski and do all the winter sports and things like that. And one day she goes out onto her property and she trips and falls or something. I can't remember exactly what happens. But when she wakes up, she's been magically transported to World War II era. And she's at this home, but it's the 1940, I think it's 1942. I think it's or maybe it's 1945, I'm not sure, version of the home that she lives in. So she meets her great-grandparents, and her grandma is a teenager, like I said, and she has to kind of spend Christmas with them. And there's a romance as well. And I gave this 3 stars. Or did I give it a 3.25? I can't remember. I want to say I gave it a solid 3 because I wished it had more Christmas in it. Like, Christmas is mentioned, and obviously they end up celebrating Christmas, but there is no like lead up to Christmas. And I guess that's probably like a more modern thing where there's so much Christmas buzz and just things to do that are Christmas related. And I'm guessing in World War II that just wasn't the case because people were struggling a little more, like, because it was wartime. So people, you know, there was rationing going on with certain types of food, and obviously people were stressed out and worried about loved ones that were overseas fighting the war, and things like that. And so I think at that time maybe celebrating Christmas and being all festive and you know, Christmas crazy wasn't appropriate. But I just wanted, because it was called Home for Christmas, I just wanted there to be more Christmas. So, but I get why 1940s Christmas may have been different from current day Christmas. The other thing was the romance in here. I didn't like it very much. It was so insta-lovey. And I don't want to go into details as to how it was or why it was. They moved way too fast for me. I didn't like it. And I get it that there were people, especially during wartime, who may have reacted this way to a new, potential beau, but it was kind of just weird to me and I didn't really like it. But otherwise, I did like the themes of family and home, and this was a very wholesome story. I could definitely see this being like a Hallmark movie. But I read Courtney Cole's other book, The Christmas Dress, and I feel like I kind of liked that one a little better. I feel like that one also got a 3-star though too. So yeah, this was good. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. And then the next book I read was for my revisit remix. It was the last book I had to read for my revisit remix, and it was The Distant Hours by Kate Morton. And this one is about our main character, Edie, who the present day, it's 1992, which I guess isn't so present nowadays. There's a 1992 timeline, and then there's a World War II timeline. And the book starts off with Edie's mother getting this long lost letter that had been intended to be delivered to her 50 years prior during World War II. And there was some sort of mix up with the post office or something. The letter got lost, and then they ended up sending it to her 50 years later, and it just sort of like sends her spiraling. And Edie is kind of confused, like why, because all she kind of knows about her mom during the war was that she was a kid and she was sent away from London, like a lot of kids were, because the war was going on and they wanted the kids to be safe. So a lot of kids from London were sent to the countryside, and her mother was one of those kids. And her mother was sent to this castle, Mildehurst Castle, where these 3 sisters lived with their dad. And that's kind of all she knew. So she kind of starts to dive deeper into the castle and the 3 sisters and their dad, who was a children's author. He wrote this children's book that was really famous. And so it kind of goes from there. She's kind of connecting the dots with, these sisters and her mother and this castle and the war and all this stuff. So unfortunately, this is my least favorite book of Kate Morton's that I have read. I'm now caught up. This was the last one. I have read all of her books at this point, and I can safely say, and I know the last book I read, The Forgotten Garden, I said that was my least favorite, but this one comes in below The Forgotten Garden. This one is my least favorite. And I think the reason was because I felt like Kate Morton's books are always slow burning. You kind of go into her books expecting that. But this one, it just felt really slow, and her other books didn't as much, but this one really dragged for me, quite frankly. And I think she also typically is really good about there's kind of multiple mysteries that you're trying to figure out that are all revealed at the end, and everything it's tied together so nicely, and she's so good at that. But in this, I felt like the reveals at the end were kind of disappointing. They were kind of lackluster, especially because this is a long book. It's 560 pages. So, you spent a lot of time with these characters in this book, and I just felt like it didn't really deliver. So I gave it 3 stars because I still think that it was written well. The characters were okay. Again, I wasn't super invested in any of them, which doesn't usually happen for me. Usually I'm pretty invested in the characters. In this one, I was a little underwhelmed with the characters as well. So, but I can't give Kate Morton at this point less than 3 stars because I do think she is a very talented writer, and the writing in here was good. The setting, the scenery, the way she set the scenes and stuff was good. It was just, I think the plot was a little weak for her, and so were the characters. So yeah, 3 stars. Not my favorite Kate Morton. And then I finished off the month and the year. I finished this book on literally New Year's Eve. I finished Under the Dome by Stephen King. This guy Comes in at over 1,000 pages, and I listened to it on audio, which I think was a good choice. Otherwise, there's no way I would have finished it so quickly. But this is about a town in, I think they're in New England somewhere. It's called Chester's Mill. It's this little town, and one day this dome just sort of appears out of nowhere, and nobody can get into town and nobody can leave. And nobody knows where the dome came from, why it's there, how long is it going to be there. The government, like the military and stuff, kind of comes in, and they, you know, are trying to gauge just how big the dome is, how high up does it go, how deep into the ground does it go. They try to penetrate the dome, you know, and things like that. There's all this mystery around the dome. And you spend all these pages with the people in this town. There are many, many characters. Stephen King even gives you, at the beginning of the book, he gives you a map of Chester's Mill, which was nice. He also gives you a whole list of characters because there were a lot of them. Overall, I liked this book. It's not one of my favorite Stephen King books, but I did like it because it wasn't what I was expecting, but I wasn't mad about it. If you go into this book wanting a ton of, like, with the focus being on the dome and why the dome is there, you will not be satisfied, because the point of the book is not so much about the dome, but how are these people going to react and relate to each other when they are essentially trapped together. Because of course the town has secrets, and there's the good guys and the bad guys, and those lines are made pretty clear. Pretty much from the get-go, you kind of know who the bad guy is and who the good guy is, and how are all these people going to relate to each other? What are people going to do when they know or realize or recognize that they can maybe do things that they would under other circumstances be held accountable for, and now there is no accountability? It's almost lawless in a sense. Everyone is kind of fending for themselves. How are all these people how are they all going to get along? And that was kind of the point of the book, is that human beings in this type of situation, it gets ugly. And in this book, it gets ugly. And especially the ending, there's a big old section that I thought was very well described. It was very detailed. It was very nasty. It was very violent. It was very graphic. It was a lot. But for me, I thought that was the point of the story. Not so much about this dome and its mysteries, but the people that are trapped under the dome. Was the point. And so for that, I think, you know, Stephen King, he is a master at writing complex characters that you can really connect to and identify with. And he is just so good at that. And so this book is a great example of how he can do that. And I mean, because there's characters in here of all walks of life, all ages, all sizes, everything, different socioeconomic classes, everything. And he writes them all so well. And I think that's kind of the highlight of this book. But I have to say, yeah, there was a point where I had probably about 200 pages left, and I'm like, what? I feel like, what has even happened here? Because there's so many subplots too going on that you kind of don't realize that 800 pages have gone by. In terms of big old Stephen King books, this definitely isn't the best. To me, it's still It and The Stand, which to me that changes every day, which one's better. This one is not to that level, but I do think it was a pretty good story. The ending, when you do get sort of an explanation of the dome, I know that's a big complaint of a lot of people that read this book. They hated the ending. They hated the explanation. They were very disappointed by it. And for me, I was okay with it because I guess I sort of left the book realizing like that wasn't the point anyway. So, again, So if you ever want to read this, change your expectations. It's not about the dome. It's about the people. So yeah, this was good. I gave it, what did I give it? A 3.75, I think is what I ended up giving it. It's one that I will keep on my shelves, but I don't know if I'll ever revisit it. We shall see. We shall see. All right, guys. So those were the books I read in December. Yeah, I'm glad that I finished out the year strong, reading a couple of big books, reading some challenging books. Yeah, all in all, not a bad month. So let me know down below what you read in December. How did you finish out 2024? Because I would love to know. And if you read any of these books, I would love to know what you thought of them too. So that is it. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching.